Hello, my name is Marian. I live in the Netherlands, and I used to live in New Zealand a long time ago. In 1975, my husband and I came to New Zealand, and we lived in New Zealand till 1990. At that time, we had our children. They were born here in New Zealand. And while we were living here in New Zealand, there was this ministry in the Netherlands that founded in that at that time. At that time, there were Ellen White books were printed by the Union, but the publishing house collapsed. They went bankrupt, and some lay people got together and they started the Ellen White Foundation, and they started publishing the Ellen White books. And the leader actually in this small group was a man called Wim Wiggers. And they got together and they started in the Netherlands, but their hard burden was really that not only the Netherlands should have books by Ellen White written in their own language, but that other people around the world should also have books written by Ellen White in their own language. The inspiration for their burden was really Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. Every tongue. That means that every language should have the everlasting gospel that was so specially given to us as Seventh-day Adventists. They should have it in their own language. And the Spirit of Prophecy books should be in every language. Another verse that inspired us was Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. I'll just read that as well. And it says, "And I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him." We know that this happened in 1844. So then it continues in verse 14. "And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed." So the burden on the hearts of this small group of people was that the Spirit of Prophecy books should go in all languages, not just the Dutch, but all people should be able to read it in their own language. So they did a research. They employed someone to find out what it in the whole world where Spirit of Prophecy books were translated and printed. And the result of that research, which took quite a long time, and someone was full-time employed in that, was that they found out that in many countries there is a presence of Seventh-day Adventists, but no literature printed in that language. Spirit of Prophecy books were not printed everywhere. So they were inspired to really try to find a way to translate the Spirit of Prophecy books in all different languages. And while they were praying about that and thinking about that, they also thought of the life of someone who lived a long time ago, William Carey. He was born in 1761 in England, and he was the son of a poor weaver, and he himself became a shoemaker. But this young man from a poor family had really a gift. He had a gift of language. And while he was working at his trade, making his shoes, he had books propped up in front of him. And while he was working, he taught himself Latin, Hebrew, Greek, Italian, French, and even Dutch. And this young man, he also, while he was working as a shoemaker, he had a colleague who took him to church, and he became a Christian, he became a Baptist. And he had not only an interest in languages, but he also had a burden for souls in all the new English territories. He heard of the adventures of Captain Cook, and he knew that there were trade posts set up in different places, especially India. And especially India was something he longed, that not only the English would trade with the Indians, but also that they would bring the gospel there. And his inspiration was Matthew 28, verse 19, where it says that the gospel should go to all nations. All people should be educated and taught. So he became a minister, he left his shoe trade, and he founded the first English missionary society. And once this missionary society was established, they needed a missionary to go to India. And he seemed the only one that wanted to go and had this burden in his heart. So in 1793, he went to India with his wife and his children. Well, I'm not going to talk a lot about all the circumstances that he had there, but they were very difficult. His wife went insane and she died, his children died. The resistance of the local people to the Christian message, but also of the traders, was huge. But nevertheless, he never lost faith. He remained faithful to God, and he just kept on with his efforts to share the gospel. And he started with schools for all children, boys and girls of all the different castes. You know that in India they have this caste system where some people are just untouchables, but he didn't consider that. He taught the children, and slowly more and more children came to the schools, and eventually he even founded a university in Serampore for the education of ministers. While he was doing all that, he was also translating the Bible in Bengali, Punjabi, Hindi, Sanskrit, and many, many more languages, a total of 35 languages. He translated the Bible, or parts of the Bible. Sometimes it was just the New Testament, but many languages, the complete Bible, in 35 languages. Just imagine what that must have been like. Some of those languages didn't even have something like, a written form or a dictionary or anything like that. He had to work from scratch, but in his life, he accomplished so much. He died in 1843 at the age of 72. And at that time, there were 700 converts, Christians in India. But I think that is not all, because after he died, the schools went on, the Bibles were printed, they were distributed. So there was a real change. And one of the sayings of him, this William Carey, was, "Expect great things from God." So the life of this man in India and his saying, "Expect great things from God," and the fact that he translated Bibles inspired us, the people from the Ellen White Foundation, to also start the work in India. And in 1994, Wim Wigges, the leader, went to India for the first time. And I must really tell you how it came about, because they were praying about it. And in the group that was praying about this work, there was one person who received in 1994 an inheritance. and she gave that inheritance to the Ellen White Foundation and said that with that money, someone should go to India and start the work. So Wim Wiggers, he went to India for his first time, and he went to Mizoram, which is in the far northeast of India. And there he met a local conference president, and his name was Brother Colney. Wim Wiggers and Brother Colney together, they established a book fund, and they called it the William Carey Book Fund. And they had certain principles that they wanted, that they thought and prayed about, and God inspired them to work on certain principles. And the way they worked it was as follows. Brother Colney would find persons that would be willing to translate the Spirit of Prophecy books into the local language. And once that was done, the money that was brought from the Netherlands would pay for the translation, and then the money from the Netherlands would pay for the printing, and usually there would be a printing of between 2,000 and 5,000 books, depending on the size of the book. And then that book that was printed would be given to the local conference as a gift. And they could then distribute the book and sell the book in whatever way they wanted. The money that came out of the sales, that should be returned to the William Carey Book Fund so that they could do a second printing. We agreed, so Wim Wiggers and Brother Colney, they agreed that they would only print a certain title once. And after that, the local conference should be able to look after further printings. And that principle, from the beginning, we've held on to that all the time that we've been working, because we know we are in 2024 now, and so it's been 30 years that this has been going on. And things started to change after a while. Brother Colney, he became president of the union. And of course, a union covers a larger area than a conference. And so he got in touch with new translators in other languages. And so he encouraged them to translate into the Spirit of Prophecy books into their own language. And so he kept in touch with all different translators in different areas. And after a while, he even became the vice president of the division. And now he could travel throughout all of India. It was really God's way of working, and it was his providence that in this way the field really opened up. He was able to travel and for his work, and at the same time find translators. Usually he approached retired pastors, and they would be, some of them were very willing to do the translation. And we must not forget how much effort is put into translation. It's not a small thing. Translation, correction, printing. Brother Colney looked after it the whole time, for all this time. And now in 2024, we have 200 different titles of Spirit of Prophecy books, and each title is printed in 2,000 to 5,000 copies, and we are in 40 languages. So we may expect great things from God. 200 books in 40 languages. We even have more languages now than William Carey had, which is just wonderful. But Brother Colney, when he was vice president of the division, he also traveled to the Far East, because that's part of the division. And from 2014 to 2020, he went multiple times to countries like Vietnam, Laos, Timor, Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar. And he made contacts in those countries. So, and he established the William Carey Book Fund in those countries. And we have now published 40 books in all those countries, 40 different books in just the 6 years that have been from 2014 to 2020. And then 2020, we all remember, Corona came and Brother Colney was not able to travel so much. The work carried on, the printing of the books was still being done, but he and we in the Netherlands, we had a burden on our hearts for Africa. We tried to work through the internet and through Zoom meetings and that type of things to establish the work in Africa, but it didn't work. So Brother Colney said, I have to go there. I have to just get in touch with the people, talk to the leaders, establish the William Carey Book Fund there too, and then we can work also in Africa. We hesitated a long time because in order to go there, he had to take, of course, the COVID jabs, and it was a difficult time, 2021, 2022. But he went. He really wanted to go. And the thing is, when he entered some of those countries, even though he had proof that he had had all his vaccinations, they demanded he had another COVID injection. Anyway, the William Carey Book Fund was established in many African countries. He traveled for months around, and some of the countries are the poorest countries in the world. Burundi, for example, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Zambia, Rwanda, all different countries in Africa. And since that time, we have published more than 20 books in the 2 years since 2022 and to date, 2024. When Brother Colney was on his travels, he became sick, and when he came back to India, he was very sick, and he was diagnosed with cancer at a very late stadium, and so he died soon after that in 2023, and that's a great loss for us. He was such a humble man. I met him several times, and you know, he was a man of God, and he had a burden in his heart for reaching the people in their own language with the Spirit of Prophecy books, just as we have. And it's with fond memories that I remember him, and I'm very grateful for all the work that he has done. The work has been able to carry on because of the finances and the money that just kept on coming in from the Netherlands. Every time Brother Colney had a new book ready, there was money from the Netherlands, from that small group of people that run the Ellen White Foundation, to give, to have it printed and distributed. And the amazing thing is that always there's been enough money. I always compare it like it's like a jar of oil that just keeps on flowing. You know the story from the Bible. And the bottom is never reached. It's never dry. It just kept on coming. And the amazing thing is that we do not publish the work we do. We do not ask for money in the Netherlands. One part of the ministry in the Netherlands is, of course, the translation of the books and the distributing of it and the translation of it. But the other part is also teaching the fundamental Adventist message. And we have Bible study groups. We have a magazine that we put out. And within those circles, the people who come to the Bible studies, people know about the work we are doing, and they are the ones that were giving. And all the money that came in, we just always spent in the books that had to go to India, the Far East, and Africa. Nobody in the foundation receives any salary. We don't have a bookshop for the books. They are just stored in containers, and we have a web shop and people buy the books. So there is little costs in the Netherlands, and everything we receive is just poured into the books that are printed overseas for us. And God has been so good. He has provided enough money all this time for all those books. And I'm so grateful for all the people that answered God's calling on them to donate money. And so God has been working in such marvelous ways with the translators, with the printing, with the distributing, but also with the ones that give the money. It is all in God's hands. It's never been in our hands. It's been God's providence working. God has been our help in every situation. And maybe I can just talk a little bit about my own personal calling into this ministry. As I said before, I lived in New Zealand from 1975 to 1990, and at that time I was not a Christian. But Doug and Angela, they are our friends, and they had their witness and their testimony about the faith and about the Bible. And after some time, I finally accepted it and came into the faith. And that was in 1989. So right after that, I went back to the Netherlands. But when I went back to the Netherlands, Doug and Angela gave me a box of books, Spirit of Prophecy books. They gave me a Bible. And I had never read the Bible before, but then I started reading the Bible. Even on the way back to the Netherlands in the airplane, I remember reading Steps to Christ. And that was all new to me. But I came in the Netherlands and I kept on reading all these Spirit of Prophecy books, not only the Conflict series, but many other books written by Ellen White and the Bible. And so my knowledge, my faith grew, and I was able to witness to other people and even started some teaching after a little while. And how I got into the ministry is a very special story too, because in the ministry, I talked about Wim Wiggers, the leader. He was giving Bible studies, but he was already a bit older, and he prayed to God that there would be someone to take up the work after he might pass away, or he thought he would pass away. So he was praying to God to give him, to lead him, to see who would carry on the work after him. And as he was praying, he told me, as he was praying, only one name came clearly into his mind, and that was my name. He received my name. We knew each other superficially. I knew about him and he knew about me. And he came to my place and he invited me to become a part of the board of the Ellen White Foundation. A little while before that, I had a dream. And in that dream, I saw, that was really a dream from God. I saw myself teaching and giving precious truth to people, which is through the written word, but also through the spoken word. And those two things together, this calling from the ministry and my personal dream, made me decide to say yes. And then started a very intense period of learning in all different ways. Wim Wiggers, he introduced me to the different people that were involved. He taught me about the way the foundation, but also the William Carey Book Fund worked. And also, he gave me a good grounding in the message. He encouraged me to read the old books by d'Aubinger, maybe you know about him. He writes about the Protestant Reformation, and I started reading those books. And then he introduced me to the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers and the message of 1888 and much more. And he just encouraged me to read those books, and I did. And it's been wonderful because I've been grounded in the Advent message and in the Christian history and church history. So he prepared me really for the work that I am able to do now with, of course, other people around us that also cooperate. But God has been so good to us, because soon after we started working together, Wim Wigges and me, he fell ill and his condition deteriorated. He ended up in a nursing home and he died too. So God has been leading all the way. He had me prepared to take over the work that the foundation was doing just at the right time. And when I look back, I must just say, God has been our help, and He's been so faithful on all levels that it's just amazing. And it's so amazing. But William Carey said, expect great things from God. And I've learned that that is so true. We may expect great things from God. We might not always see it directly in our lives, but God is working through so many people. Just imagine how many people are involved in just accomplishing all this work that is being done. We know that the great controversy, it says that in the end, during the loud cry, many people will come into the faith because they first learned the message from a book, from a publication. And our publishing work will bring in a great harvest at the end of time. And I believe that is true. And that is why I think doors have been opened for us to publish books even in the poorest country in Africa. We've been able to print books by the thousands in the Netherlands. Last year we had the Olympic Games in France, which of course is not very far from us, but there were 20,000 great controversies in Dutch distributed at that time, 20,000 in the French language, and another 20,000 in the English language. And they flow through this tiny ministry in the Netherlands. And I'm so grateful because the books will do a wonderful work. There will come a time when there is no internet. There will come a time when people have books in their hands. So I feel God has been greatly blessing us and leading us. And I know He will finish the work and accomplish everything if we are just willing instruments in His hands. Amen.